Hello, and welcome to the Women Who STEM the Gap podcast, an IIT Delhi and Co Impact initiative. I am Ridhima Sharma, and I'm excited to bring you the insights and experiences of some incredible women in STEM. In this episode, I will be speaking with Nandita Jayaraj, a science communicator, journalist, and co author of Lab Hopping Women Scientists in India. You can learn more about her work in the description below. Hi, Nandita. Thank you so much for speaking with me. I'm very excited to learn more about the work that you do. Just to start off, could you just, tell me a little bit about your background and the kind of work that you're doing in science communication?
So just to quickly introduce myself, I'm a science journalist, and I think a lot of the work that I'm known for has to do with this platform that Ashima Dogra and I started called thelifeofscience.com. Back in 2016, we started documenting the work being done by women in science in India, and writing about not just the nature of their research, but also about their journeys and the kinds of experiences they've had in Indian academia. And this project, which we also call Lab Hopping, has come out, and I mean it emerged into into a collective with many other people doing the storytelling, many more stories being told. The types of formats that started coming out also expanded into, all kinds of multimedia, and also a few books, including the most recent book, which is called Lab Hopping, which Ashima and I wrote, which is kind of a reportage, or kind of trying to tell the story of the gender gap in Indian science through the hundreds of interviews that we had conducted, trying to sort of put everything in a nutshell and provide a story which kind of makes sense of the numbers. That is the gist of my work. Also, there's also another dimension of my work where I just do, communicate science, which is what I love to do. Just talk to people about the kinds of science that is happening, and tell fun and engaging stories which could be read by anybody.
So, did you pursue science journalism like after a journalism degree or after a science degree? Could you tell us a little bit about that background, the genesis behind starting a life of science?
Sure. So, I mean, I don't think I ever thought, life of science was never part of the plan. So it's not like I engineered my education towards doing something like this. But my educational background is I studied science. I was very much the hordes of people in the early 2000s who were just being pushed into science for not reasons that not always have to do with liking science or be having any kind of a passion for science, but just because that was seen as the place with the most promise and the most chances at being successful. And I don't know, maybe that hasn't changed too much, but it was that time. So that's mainly the reason that I studied science. I, in fact, did my master's in bioinformatics. It's only then that I sort of realized I'm not prepared to make this commitment to a PhD, which seemed like the, natural step forward. And I found basically another route to go with my science education. I have been trained in the sciences, and frankly, I quite liked science. And it's just that I wasn't too much interested in working in a laboratory or creating science, but I was very much interested in writing and creating stories out of science. That's when I realized that there is this field called science communication and science journalism. So I did a diploma course in journalism. It wasn't, and as far as I know, there's still no dedicated science journalism degree in India. So I did a PG diploma in journalism, but I kind of tailored my electives to include science journalism, environmental journalism, and gender studies was my other chosen elective. Maybe that's kind of where the consciousness sort of began, where I started finding words. I started finding the vocabulary to articulate many of the things that I was observing and many of the feelings that I was having. And eventually went on to work at a newspaper where, I got to see a little more of how things happen on ground. That's what preceded the life of science.
Wonderful. So, this is very, very exciting. One of the things that, you talked about was that in lab hopping, you talk about the gender gaps in STEM. What are the kind of stories that came out in the book or, while you were doing these interviews? And secondly, was any of it sort of mirrored also things that you saw in your own experience while you were pursuing your STEM degree?
We saw too many stories that we came across, and while there were many patterns, there were many repetitions and there were themes that we started noticing, with maybe like a dozen interviews in. But we also started noticing that experiences were incredibly diverse just among women themselves, and the impossibility of grouping women into this one homogenous group sort of dawned on us very quickly during the project. And it was just like useless to try and generalize too much and to try and make a sort of a consensus based on so many people's experiences. I think that was one of the early realizations that we had. And it also gave us glimpses into the worlds that exist between the numbers or behind the numbers, basically, and for example, there's a lot of discourse about the leaky pipeline and, women who drop out of science are seen as losses, like, their lives have been wasted and our resources have been wasted into training them and losing them. But when we speak to a lot of the women themselves, we realize that for them, it wasn't that way. I won't say they were the most ideal scenarios, but in their head, their narrative that they built for themselves, this was like an empowered choice that they made for their well-being. Judging the situation and the kind of infrastructure available, this was what was best for them. And there were also a handful of cases where academia was simply not a nurturing space to do research. And I think a lot of scientists across genders will say that there are problems in science. Gender is not the only problem, and there are serious problems in science in India that are placing hurdles to a scientist being able to do good science, whether that is in terms of, funding or just in terms of the red tape and the bureaucracy that makes really simple things difficult. So we also met a few people who had left academia, but to engage with science in a more meaningful way or in a more productive way, in fact. So, I mean, that also sort of made us think beyond these. A lot of schemes also that the government comes up with really encourages us to look at, these women with pity and charity cases. But speaking to them, we realized that we need some sort of a shake-up in the way a lot of our approaches are framed.
Right. So, when you talk about numbers, what are some of the, numbers that you focused on with your book, as well as with the digital project? And how did the stories that, you found through your interviews correlate or diverge from these numbers that, okay, people are falling out? One of the things you mentioned was that, the environment was hostile, people were leaving for their own mental well-being. But what were some of the other hurdles that you found were causing this leaky pipeline, so to speak?
So one of the numbers that we, I think, spent some time on in the book is the distribution of women scientists across institutes. And if there's one good resource from the government side, it's the All India Survey of Higher Education, the AISHE reports that come out every other year or every year, I'm not sure, but that's quite comprehensive. And while it's a bit difficult to pass information, if you make the effort, you can actually gather a lot from there. So we spend some time there to get an idea of course, we talk about this 14% or 15% or 16% women on average in science in India, but like, where are these women? And for example, we knew for a fact that, several top institutes, IITs and IIScs, TIFR often have 10% or even lesser women. So like, how exactly is this 15% average being formed? Where are they of course, they're not overrepresented anywhere, but where are they represented better and where are they really poorly represented? And of course, we were not the first ones to do it. I don't think we are, but we also noted that the numbers of women in science were far more in the less prestigious places to do science. So, namely, starting from private universities where they were the highest, public state universities where they were a little lower, central universities even lower, and then the institutes of national importance were usually the lowest, which I still find constantly fascinating, because if you look at discourse about women in science, and most of the the events and the panel discussions and the most woke language comes from places with the least representation of women in science. So both Ashima and I had a lot of fun looking at these numbers and also speaking to women in these public and private universities to get a sense of why are they there and what is it like there. And it was really humbling to see that there were so many highly qualified women doing extremely important work in their disciplines. But I wouldn't say they were rotting away. In reality, they were doing critical work because they are the ones who are influencing so many students. But for so little, they get really little in return. In terms of the respect they receive, in terms of the seriousness with which the broader scientific community takes them, and of course, infrastructure. There's no match to the infrastructure that universities have compared to research institutes and other top institutes. So I think that is one set of numbers that I found really fascinating.
And what were some of the key themes that emerged when thinking about the hurdles that women were facing across, say, these national sort of IIT, IIM type institutions versus like smaller public or private universities? And also like a previous question of was there something similar that you experienced during your education, or is that something you're reflecting on now?
Personally, for me, I studied in very nondescript places, which, private universities, mainly both my bachelor's and my master's. And I studied in Tamil Nadu, which is also considered conservative in many ways, and it is. And I was very much aware of my classmates, and how when I was there, it was very much normalized for most of the young women around me that this is just the step before marriage. So that was just like, and there were some, in fact, some of the smartest people in class were often women. It's just that they, not a lot of them really had, seemed at least vocalized any ambitions of, reaching big places. There was a cap to their dreams, and they were very practical about it. No matter how strong personalities they were, marriage was just something that was taken for granted as on the cards. And these are also often people who are not, the socially elite classes. I often look back on try to make sense of what I saw with, how somehow I talk so much about women in science now, but I never really looked at these women in my class and my masters as women of science. And there is, I feel, a big gap in what we talk about and what a bulk of our women studying sciences are experiencing. And, of course, like for most students, in fact, thinking about discrimination. You're not thinking about underrepresentation, and so much of blatant discrimination, casual sexism is completely normal, laughed about, and for all that we say, of course, I think in many ways South India is better in many ways than many other parts of India, but there is also extreme misogyny that is rampant and not stood up against as much as it should be even here. And this is even so in scientific institutes, the kind of it can make women feel extremely isolated, and it's very natural to see the kind of gender segregation that we often see. I think gender segregation was a big thing in my education. If right from school, in fact, right from that age when we're approaching puberty, it was just normal for boys to sit separate from girls, and everything was made a really big deal of, and that really sort of hampered our freedom, hampered how close we could be with our teachers, or how we can have conversations and discussions with our classmates about about academic things, about stuff. So this old boys clubs and all of that was very much pronounced in different ways throughout my childhood.
Thank you so much for sharing this. How did you navigate that life, and how do you see, I'm parallelly asking about your journey and some of the things you found in your work, like how did you navigate these hurdles or challenges or things that you were seeing, and how have you seen women who you've interviewed in science navigate these kinds of challenges?
For sure, I don't think I fought back as much as a lot of young women I see today do, and as much as I would today, because of this lack of a solidarity group. We weren't having these conversations. So even if I knew my classmates were feeling that way, unless we speak about it, they're not going to stand up for me if I say something is unfair or something someone said is wrong. The times when I started doing that, it was largely because I knew there was somebody in this group who would stick up for me, or often it was seeing them do it and then realizing, okay, like if they can stand out, then if they can stand up to this, then I can as well, or at least I can support them. If I don't want to be the person who's starting something, at least I can join whoever does. And one instance of this we speak about in the book also. I think Ashima for me was influence in just seeing that it's okay to stand up and tell people you're not comfortable with something. And while of course there are often consequences for this, and even in our case I think there were consequences, but also we build up this fear in our head sometimes that we can never it would be disastrous if we ever said something. But for many of us, especially those of us with a little bit of privilege, it's not going to be that bad. We can, if we have some sort of privilege enough, then it's not going to be so bad to fight every fight. You keep like sort of pushing the boundary a little more, and then you reach a point where you realize, okay, I can't cross this boundary because it will make life too difficult for me. So and it helps to have someone have your back while you're pushing these boundaries. And I think in the introduction to the book we speak about one instance where Ashima and I were working together at a magazine, and we had one very off-color Women's Day celebration, which Ashima finally wrote to HR and told them that wasn't right. And while I don't know if they, I'd like to think they would think twice before organizing a similar celebration the next day. But at the very least, us, women-dominated team, younger than us, at least they would have seen and thought that, okay, this person, our senior, someone we look up to, is this thinks that this is not okay, then this feeling I have, this discomfort that I have is valid. So I think, to recognize our privilege and to recognize that whether we like it or not, we probably have some power over people and to sort of exercise that whenever you can is a lesson I'm still learning.
Thank you. So what was it about this Women's Day celebration?
Yeah, it was, I think, something very typical. Even I hear it even today from my friends who are in corporate, and the HR themselves are forced to organize these really silly things. So in this case, it was, I believe, on Women's Day, we were called up to the terrace where the food is served, and they had different food for the women and different. I think they had some extra samosas and juice for us, whereas the guys had to have regular food. And then they gave us a gift bag which had some makeup lipstick print all over it, and something, I mean, not very useful inside. I can't remember. It was just really meaningless, and it just made us feel like we already sort of, we were facing kind of an old boys club situation at the time. So it just felt kind of further demeaning that this is what they think we want, when we were actually actively fighting for more important things, right? Then more agency and more so the situation that we were in, it felt intolerable at the time.
I have so many questions. I'm sorry. I'm just going back and forth with what should I ask you, what should I not? But another question I had was that lab hopping as well as the lifeofscience.com I've seen has like so many incredible stories of women in STEM. Have there been any women that you've particularly been inspired by or influenced by in your journey, whether they are in part of like the book, the website, or perhaps somebody you saw earlier while you were studying?
It's a tough question for me because I'm the kind of person who's very easily, I listen to people, and then I guess it's kind of a gift. I can instantly see like the good in them, and I'm very easily inspired. But because I get asked this question a lot, I have some people that I can bring up. One is a popular figure, Gagandeep Kang, who, of course, a lot of us know because she's for her voice in public health crisis in India, and for her scientific, brilliance, and the work that she's done in getting India's first indigenous vaccine deployed for rotavirus. So just and also her personality is is one that's very amenable to thinking, oh my God, she's amazing. But we also know that she's been extremely nice and supportive to us, and I believe to a lot of people. We met more than 5 of her proteges, of people who are doing really well, and also when we speak to her, many people of her level often don't want to engage with the issue beyond on a superficial level because I guess they don't need to, and also they are part of, I mean, they see that they work very hard to get into a lot of spaces and they don't want to risk losing it. But Gagandeep has been consistent, so refreshingly honest with us, and she's given us these really rare examples where like for example a lot of people we interviewed said that that they've had to work 2 times, so 3 times as hard as a man of equivalent talent would to reach where they were. But Gagandeep, she took the time, and I'm sure these are not easy things to talk about, to actually tell us what in her own scientific journey has set her back, the kinds of unthinking sexism that needlessly sets women scientists' careers, slows it down. It really helps to have someone like her talk about these concrete examples, because it will convince a lot of people who would otherwise not be convinced. I can tell you one more person if you want. Or
yes, somebody who's perhaps not as popular.
Yeah. So this other person, I don't want to say her name because I'm not completely sure if she would be okay with being identified, but she is a scientist, a mid-career scientist, not as well known. And she's been fighting this really painful sexual harassment battle in her institute. it was basically, it kind of like, it's not an exaggeration to say it in many ways destroyed her life, because her health, scientific reputation, her personal reputation, the worst kinds of consequences she's gone through, but she's never stopped fighting. And she's also a friend. She's, over the years become a friend to me. So we keep in touch. And I know it's not that she has unlimited energy. I know she's being affected. I know this is like beating her down, but she refuses to take shit. And that, why should she? Even something as, it's not minor, but even something which a lot of people would let go of, like, I think during some sort of a celebration in her institute, all of the men were given these scientific tasks and scientific committee, and whereas she was put in charge of something like refreshments, or something really. So even that kind of stuff, she would stand up and speak against, and that is such a gift that she's giving the future generations. And she didn't have to do that. It certainly made things, put her in uncomfortable situations. It put her in, it doesn't make her everybody's favorite person, but like every time she tells me this kind of stuff, part of me feels a bit protective and like, maybe you should let this go. But like, I know the immense value of what she's doing. And I think there are many, many people like her. There are many, many people like her. And these kind of small battles that we'll probably never hear about is, I think, gives me hope that, people are not going to stand for shit very long.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing this. And it's absolutely true. Seeing and hearing more about women's different journeys in these fields where we find women are often held back or allowed to go forward, or, have, like you said, that there is a limit to their ambition, right? There's only so far that they're allowed to go. In the present scenario, just like connected to this is how important are role models? Like, what has been your experience when you've taken these stories to people, whether it's through the website? I think the website came first and then the books, right? Yes. So what was the reception to it? How important have role models been, especially for young women?
I'm not completely sure of this, because sometimes I feel like a lot of our initiatives, women in science initiatives, also are very role model centric. So I have mixed feelings about over relying on this tactic. It plays a role, no doubt. But if we are in our quest to increase the number of scientific role models, I think it will only bear fruit if these role models are accessible by people. Just reading about a Marie Curie, there are people also who have been inspired by that, but that alone is not going to help establish a career in science. But if we're able to link local people to their communities where students or young people there can access them, and not just girls, even boys have to grow up seeing women occupy these different spaces. So role models are important for all genders, but for them to be able to be within talking distance, whether it is virtually or whether it is face to face, that is, I think, more important than just writing. I mean, as somebody who has written a book, I think that's really just the very, very starting point. And one thing we wanted to do with Life of Science, the reason that we want this geographical diversity was important to us, was that somebody in any state, in any town, any district of India should be aware of the science that is happening. And there is science happening in, we think that only in the Bangalores and in the Punes and Delhi, Calcutta, there's science happening, but that's not true. Somewhere in the Western Ghats, we'll suddenly find a cardamom research institute, or there'll be like a forensic lab somewhere in, other obscure parts. So if we could, and I think when Life of Science started, it was very much, we were trying to reach these kind of places where nobody even knew about that this place existed, but there are people sitting there doing science. So if those people could somehow be accessible to their communities, then I think that would be really valuable.
Absolutely. I think you connected the question on role models to my next question, which, like you said, it's important not just to read about role models, but to have them be accessible. So what role can potentially mentoring processes, especially now when we're seeing a lot of digital media being influential in young people's lives, what role can digital mentorship perhaps play in inspiring or encouraging more girls or women in STEM?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question, because I haven't really experimented with any of these and it's not my expertise. I've only explored the potential of journalism, and even that, we're not researchers, we don't quantify the impact that we're having or anything. So I still can't say for sure what works or what doesn't, except for what I see. And I haven't really observed closely mentorship programs to know for sure whether, digital mentorship and other things work. But what I do is go by what people I speak to tell me, and mentorship is one thing that women scientists continuously emphasize. Including Gagandeep Kang herself is a big proponent of the need for mentorship, and she's like a living example, because she has, I think, 8 or more people that she's mentored who's doing really well. But for sure, I think there needs to be an understanding of what it means to be, what do we even mean when we say mentor, and what is a kind of commitment, because it's not an easy thing to do. You can't, like, now a lot of institutes, I notice that faculty, there's a student faculty or student senior mentorship system, and I don't know how much that is working. Like, even the IITs have it, but we see all these terrible things happening. So I don't know, like, do these people understand what mentorship is? Do our students, do our faculty have the bandwidth to be good mentors? Do mentees understand what mentors are, who you can rely on for what? There's so much of, I think, conversations that maybe should start at the school level. I don't know, but I think unless we have a proper idea of these things, then just starting these programs may not give us the results we want.
No, absolutely. I think these are very insightful points. Just moving forward and keeping this mentoring part also in mind, if I'm sure you would get a lot of questions from students, young people, when you do talks, or perhaps, I don't know, people reaching out to you via your website. What might be some of the most asked questions that, say, young girls or women or generally people interested in STEM have for you, and what advice, 1 or 2 pieces of advice, would you give to young people aspiring to a career in STEM?
I had this nice encounter recently in Chennai, in the Institute of Mathematical Sciences. I gave a talk to school children, to girls and boys and teachers. I think there were about maybe 100 of them or 50 of them. I can't remember. Anyway, so I spoke about people that I've met, and I also told them what I do, and I spoke about some of the people that I've met and the kinds of work that they do. And in the end, these 2 girls came up to me and they were like, "It's so nice that you get to do what you love." And they really sounded like they meant it. And then I thought for a second, and I realized, wow, that is really fortunate. So I think there's a lot to gain. Like, if you go out there and speak about something that you're passionate about, and your audience can see, it really sort of it's kind of contagious, and it's really exciting, invigorating to see somebody passionate about what they do. So even like these subjects that you may have considered boring, like in fact today I'm just returning from a talk from a historian, And history is one subject I did not like in school. I never found the appeal. But listening to her talk about her work, how she made some of the, theorizing on, little documents that she's found over the centuries old documents, it really sort of made me realize that, wow, like historians are like detectives. This I wish as a student I got this opportunity to see live historians in action, to see live history being, unearthed, being made, and also thinking about what qualifies as history and how human made that. I think that, even in terms of we're talking about mentorship and what kind of questions people have asked me. So I guess I haven't exactly answered your question, but it just made me think of these past two encounters that I've had. We do get like a lot of, I don't think, I wouldn't say people are teaming up to be mentored by me or anything, but for sure there are a lot of science communication is kind of, the interest in it is booming. I don't know if the field itself is booming as much. It's a little scary right now how many people seem to want to come to the field and not aware that it's not a complete great or opportunity filled or fruitful, in terms of earning money and all, which is also really important for people. It's not the most ideal place to be, but a lot of people ask us about how to get into science communication, or if they can publish in places. Through the Life of Science, we've been fortunate to every publication season, we kind of onboard one person as our season coordinator, and these are usually sort of beginners to the field of science communication or science journalism, people who are familiar with our project and who want to sort of get a taste of the editorial process, and they work with us for about 8 months, and some of them go on for longer. Shayantan Datta, who joined us as coordinator quite a few years back, is still with us. So now we have like a third team member. Vishwam Shankaran is another coordinator of ours who was, I think, with us in our second season and has gone on to do really interesting things. And yeah, I'm very proud of everything Vishwam has done. So that's kind of just, it just happened that I guess some sort of mentorship did happen out of the simple reason that we were more experienced in the field, and Vishwam was in a space where they were accepting and in a mood to learn. So they really made full use of it, and they're doing so well in their career right now.
That's wonderful. You spoke about like seasons of publishing. Could you just take me through, the processes that you go through with the Life of Science or lab hopping?
What we used to do is basically publish, we would publish for about 7 to 8 months a year, regularly, like weekly. Usually it was weekly, content was being updated weekly on the website, and we left the rest of the time for sort of planning, fundraising. So the rest of the year would go into doing that. So we completed 6 seasons from 2016 to 2021, I believe. Yeah, so that's kind of how it went. Yeah, all the other stuff like books and talks and on-ground events would just happen as it could happen. Yeah, was there anything more specific you'd like to know?
No, this clarifies things. And just my final question to you. You've done the website, you've had a book and other publications come out. What's next for you and for the Life of Science?
Well, that is the $1 million question. We're waiting for someone to drop $1 million into our lap. Well, I'm only half joking, really. So we kind of, I think all 3 of us reached a spot where we needed to focus on our own savings for a while and things didn't happen exactly like we wanted to for our season 7, so we couldn't do a season 7 as we usually do every year, and we thought that was, fair enough, and we're not guilting ourselves too much over it. So right now we kind of have a lot of personal and professional things going on independently. Meanwhile, one good reason I feel that we're taking this break is because this book that we've written over 6+ years, research and a lot of time put into this book. The book was just out earlier this year, so we really do want to spend at least the first year of the book rather than just create more content. Let's get this, at least there's a lot of stuff that's already been done. Let's get that out there. So we're very actively going to places, speaking about everything that we found in the book, engaging with the community in various ways. As I said, the publishing on the website is right now on a standstill. We're also doing collaborations, like I have one ongoing with the archives at NCBS, where we're doing some oral histories of senior women in science. Even places like archives and museums have a huge gender gap, so they end up being highly male dominated. So the archives group here were interested in hearing from people that we otherwise wouldn't hear from, and because we've been doing this as Life of Science, we've heard of many people across places who have been working in the sciences for a long time. So I think a lot of important work is happening in the background, even if it's not super visible to people. And we are keeping abreast with all the policy developments, and our editorial conversations, WhatsApp groups are still going strong. I have faith that at some point when the time is right, it's we still occasionally talk about ideas we have and things we'd like to do, and I think it will happen in time, though I don't want to say any kind of date or put any kind of pressure on ourselves right now.
Wonderful. So I have many more questions for you, but I think I will stop here for now. Do you have any parting thoughts, any final thoughts you'd like to share, whether it's some pearls of wisdom or advice, or just
I think I've given you a lot of pearls. I don't know if they're wisdom or not, but no, but I would like to express my appreciation for what all of you are doing at IIT Delhi, and I think there's so much to learn the other institutes, the other Gati institutes, to see that it's not just enough to collect the data, but you need to make it accessible. You need to make realize that the world is not out to get you, and sort of put things out there, be transparent about your weaknesses, about your gaps, and see like that the criticism can probably push you forward. Most importantly, to see the value of working with sociologists on this issue, because the gender gap is a sociological issue, and scientists can't sit in a room and scheme their way out of it. So I think it looks like what you all are doing has the potential to be a role model, and good luck for everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. At STEM the Gap, our goal is to bridge the gender imbalances in STEM through multidisciplinary research, policy, and practice. If you enjoyed listening to this conversation, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and stay connected with us through our website and social media pages. Links in description.